welcome you to this program. We're going to remember James Barker, a well known photographer in Alaska who documented Native culture, particularly in the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta. We're going to learn a little bit more about him. And I have with me Charles Mason, who taught photography and art for 36 years at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And also, we have Jim's wife with us, Robin Barker. And Robin, it's been many years since we've talked. It's been a lot has happened since then, and we've both gotten a lot older. And
Mhm.
as I told you when I first heard the news, that I had always hoped to have one more conversation with Jim about his work because I felt when I first met him about 30 years ago that it was consequential, that he was doing something that no other photographer, well known photographer of his caliber, was doing at that time in Alaska. So, Robin, just tell us how it's been for you and Jim in these last few years.
He was 89 when he died. And these last few years, he's finally had to slow down. But um, he he got to the point where it was really hard for him to just get around, and he was using a walker and so on. But he could get himself out the front door and just photograph the trees right in front of the house. He just wanted to make images right up until he couldn't anymore. And yeah, he was alive behind that camera in a way that he wasn't at any other time.
I don't know why, but I'm not surprised to hear that because I felt that passion the very first time I met him. And at the time, Uh, I was a news director at KYUK in Bethel, a station that he had also worked at, and he had many wonderful stories to share about his time at KYUK, the public
Yeah.
radio station, and we'll go into that later. But I recognize that passion for taking pictures from him and actually learned quite a bit when he would share some of his techniques and process. But I'd like to go to you, Charles. What is it about that passion that Jim had that set him apart?
Well, I talked to people a lot about Jim over the years, and one of the things you don't see young photographers or any photographers doing these days is living someplace like Bethel and what 14 years or so,
Mm.
and just making your life work so that you can photograph and document a particular lifestyle anywhere in the world. And that's what Jim and Robin did in Bethel when they were out there. And the resulting photographs have a dimension to them that you can't get by parachute journalism, where someone comes in for a week from New York and or anywhere and figures they understand a particular part of a culture and documents it and leaves, and then uses those images over the next year or two to make an assumption about a place, perhaps. And it could be right or wrong, but it's still not doesn't have that texture and depth of the work that Jim did in his photography out in Western Alaska.
I would call that quality that he had authenticity.
Absolutely. And, you were talking, I remember the first time I watched Jim shooting was at the Governor's Ball in about 1989 or I don't know, 87. It's when Steve Cooper had a ball.
You were shooting us.
Yeah, I was watching Jim too because Jim was, I mean, even more, all documentary photographers like to claim they have this invisibility cloak they can put on and kind of be the fly on the wall. Jim really did. I mean, he kind of slunk around the edges and moved through the crowd and had transmitted something where people pretty well ignored him. And it gave his camera a real ability to capture truth in front of him, and what things really look like and not interpreted through his ideas of what was going on in front of it. So I think he was a unique individual. And there have been other photographers like Jim, but there aren't a lot, that do that and put that kind of themselves out there to do that kind of work. I've never done what Jim did, by even come close. So I have always admired him and his work and Robin and what they accomplished in always getting ready and just in their lives.
Well, let's talk about his book, Always Getting Ready. It was a big coffee table book that came out, and it was a beautiful book because it captured the subsistence lifestyle of the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta. And Robin, do you remember about the time frame those pictures were taken and Always Getting Ready?
I think most of them were between the early to mid 70s for the next 12, 13, 14 years. He did go back after we moved any number of times, particularly for dance festivals. But yeah, it was a period when the pipeline was just being built. There was a lot of money around. So there were in Bethel, there were new enterprises. The hospital was expanding and people were developing a sense of their place in the political world. And and there was just getting to be television. And so it was a really pivotal point in the history of the region and in changes in lifestyle and attitudes. He was very, I think we were both very lucky to be there at that time because things are not the same anymore.
Yeah.
That's right. And many of the photographs in Always Getting Ready are scenes you can't see today. Uh, and some of those you may not see 20, 40, 50 years from now. Uh, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of those photos. One of my favorites is this elder who is coming out of her house with an armload of seal gut. I mean, they're like little balloon tubes, and her arms are like completely full. And Robin, you were there when that photograph was taken.
Yeah, I have to take some credit for that. You know, he had a great eye and he knew what he wanted and so on. But once in a while, when I was tagging along, I would see something. And so it was the time when the seal gut it was inflated and strung all over the village to dry, vibrating in the wind. And but people were starting to take it down. So we were walking along, and I looked over, and there's Frances Sugan, who knew Jim quite well.
And this was in Tooksuk Bay.
Took Bay, yeah, and she had this arm full of seal gut, and I'm like, Jim, look back, and and sure enough, and she gave him a big smile. She knew perfectly well what he was going to be up to. And but they had a relationship. And that's, we were talking earlier about how he worked. And one of the things was that if he went to a village that he hadn't been to before, he didn't take his camera out until day and a half later. Um, he just helped pull nets and, you know, uh, just chop wood or whatever was involved. I mean, people knew that he was going to be there to take photographs, but he made sure that he was helpful. He had a very endearing quality. He could be very funny and make fun of himself. And the little old ladies loved him. I don't
Well,
know. He had that special, they just made him fried bread when he'd show up at the fish camp or whatever.
Well, one of the things that you realize when you look at his photos that he had to have a high degree of trust. And one of the photos I'm thinking of and Always Getting Ready is he actually got into a native steam bath and people are not dressed. And you have to have a lot of trust for someone to allow a camera into a steam bath. And,
Yeah.
you know, Charles, can you talk about that a little bit of how hard it is for photographers to get that level of trust?
Well, I think what Robin's talking about is was his secret weapon. He had a sense of humor. I remember him telling a story about the steam bath, if I get it right, Robin, about they were waiting to, chase him out of there with the heat, and he didn't cave. But he also had to keep the camera clear and working inside of
Yeah.
there because it would fog over, I'm sure. And on top of that, you're right. I mean, I don't know if I have a sauna at home. I don't know if I'd let any photographer in there when I'm taking a sauna with my wife. So it's something that a good photographer and people do different things to sort of disarm their subject or become invisible. And I think Jim's was often through humor or through the way he carried himself. And he
Yeah,
definitely respected the people he was shooting. I mean, that's in every picture that he's got.
yeah,
And that's a very important thing to transmit. Some photographers transmit, I'm just taking from you. I want something. Do this for me. And I don't think Jim had that bone in his body. You know, he was there to document what he saw, and people liked him. And so they trusted him. And
yeah.
it's pretty much that simple. The
What
camera, of course, is another layer of that, but that was what he was up
I gotta I gotta tell you the whole story about that steam bath.
Oh,
to.
do tell.
Yeah. And that is, it was pretty typical for a new white person who shows up to get tested. And part of being in the steam bath is even like elders and youngers driving somebody out because they're not tough enough to stay in. And so this was in Tooksuk Bay, and they had built a very traditional steam bath with a fire, an actual fire, not a stove, and a hole in the top. And they invited Jim to come with them with obvious intentions. And so he got in there and it got smokier and smokier and smokier, and he thought he was going to die. And it wasn't like the steam baths that have a little entryway. It was just there was a door, and they did chase him out.
Eventually.
Yeah, and so there he was it was right in the middle of the village without a stitch on, but he's holding his camera, right? And and
You mean he was naked
yeah.
taking that picture himself?
Well, he was in the steam
He was
bath.
in the steam bath with the camera, and then they drove him out. So the next time I came out, a bunch of my lady friends said, "We saw your husband."
And they really saw
They
him.
really saw him,
But
yeah.
but but that's so
Yeah.
Jim. He's so authentic. And when I look at that picture too, I am reminded they've got grass baskets over their mouths,
Mhm.
masks that they've made to
Right.
kind of protect their lungs from the searing heat
And the smoke.
and the smoke. But
And they look comfortable, don't they? I
where
mean,
would you see a picture like that today? I don't think that picture could be taken today. Do you?
No, I don't think so.
I
I
don't
don't
know
think
how
so.
that culture's changed out there, but
Yeah.
that was a time and a place. That's really the role of his photographs, was to leave that time and place for us all.
He had a gift for capturing the moment as well. I mean, but and speaking of moments, I mean that moment in the steam bath was definitely a moment. And I just wondered technically, how could you do that without wrecking your camera from the sheer heat in that room or
Wow.
having fog?
You're scooting up to the edge, he was probably using a Leica camera and they're pretty hardy. But the problem isn't so much the long-term problem with the camera, which probably didn't happen. Those cameras are pretty hardy, but it's just keeping your lens clean enough to see in a very steamy atmosphere. I'm guessing Jim had to wipe the lens every few seconds just to keep it clear so that the image wasn't completely veiled over with fog and condensation on the lens. But that's the Arctic stuff. When it's super cold or super hot, or you bring a camera from super cold into a heated wood stove heated cabin, it just gathers all the moisture in the room and then freezes up. So one of the pains in the butt of shooting up here.
You really have to know what you're doing to work with the climate to be able to do this. One of the things that Jim told me once, because all of his photos are black and white, and I said, "Don't you like to do color? Wouldn't it be wonderful?" And he said, "Well, I don't think people in the lower 48 understand subsistence. And if I shot these photographs in color, it might trigger the kind of response that I don't want people to have. I don't want them to focus on the blood." And at the
Yeah.
time that Jim was documenting these photos, uh, there were a lot of animal rights activists and people in the
Right.
lower 48 that really didn't understand that subsistence was a way of life. They were horrified by that. So I think he kind of made that decision. But because he obviously felt that subsistence was, I would almost say, the way he treated the subject matter in his photographs is sacred,
Yeah, reverent. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
reverent. Can you talk about
Yeah.
that, Robin?
Yes, I do. Um, and it he talked a lot about capturing people's place in the land as they interacted with the land. And I think even some of his photographs not from that area reflect that same thing. But I was going to say about the question of color. Um, what you're saying is very true. He was concerned about people's reactions to the blood. But he also said that he was he was happier with black and white because color, when you shoot in color, it's to some extent, at some layer, it's about color. And he just felt like that distracted from the essential thing that he was going for, which was to get the individual personalities and interactions and all of that sort of um, in a way sort of a psychological setting for what people were doing, and that color would just be distracting.
We've talked about some of the moments that Jim has captured that are difficult moments to catch, but almost in every picture in Always Getting Ready and some of his other work, you see the moment so intensely. Like one of my absolute favorites are these kids playing tug of war, and you can really see in those little boys' faces how intent they are.
Yeah. And that is the moment.
Mhm.
It's an old term from a guy named Cartier-Bresson, who Jim and I both admired, one of the first real documentary street photographers. And his book was called The Decisive Moment because it's that peak second to push the button when whatever's going on, the expression or the action or is just perfect to get what you're capturing. That tug of war picture is a is a perfect example of a decisive moment. Just that intensity, that instant, and the grip on the rope, and you don't need the rest of the picture, right? You got it all
Yeah,
right there. So,
that was a great day.
and
Fourth of
Jim's
July.
he's got so many like that, and sometimes it's a quiet moment. I'll go back to the seal cutting. That's not a big flashy action. It's just the right composition and quiet moment when things are going on. The guy in the background is pointing into the air, one of the men talking. And, that's the little bit of moment in that picture, but it's much quieter. Still very important.
Well, let's talk about some of your favorite moments of Jim's. I know you mentioned the seal cutting picture. Charles, what are some things that stand out to you as for photographers like a real achievement in capturing moments?
Oh, when they're dragging the beluga whale up onto the beach, Jim's down behind them with a little bit wider lens, and he puts the people across the horizon at the top, and the whale is filling the frame in front of him, and a wide angle sort of lets you look down and up at the same time. And it's a perfect image. There's nothing in there that you would change. There's so many. It's almost too many to think of. What's the other one you were looking for me? Not the tug of war,
Oh,
but the stick
the
ball.
stick. Yeah,
Simon.
yeah, lap ball
Yeah,
game.
lap ball game. And
Yeah,
the kid is getting ready to hit the ball. The ball's in the picture,
yeah.
and but the eyes are like this. And that's just a gorgeous image, and it just occurs over and over with Jim's work. When you're the highest compliment given to photographers when you really do wish you had shot that. And I wish I'd shot so many of Jim's
Yeah,
pictures. I just, ugh, gosh, he got it. And I didn't, of course, I wasn't
yeah,
out there, but it's and then a great appreciation for the fact that he did
yeah.
um,
That
over and
photograph
over.
was in an edited volume by Ralph Steiner, who is a photographer. The name of the book is In Spite of Everything, Yes.
Yeah,
And and that is, I mean, his work was positive, There are wonderful photographers who see the dark side of things, and those photographers are really important. But that wasn't Jim. He just really he wanted to see he wanted to show the world people at their best, you know. He wanted to see the good things in people and represent that.
Yeah.
Well, that was one thing about Jim is that he came from a place of genuine love and caring. And did he take those photographs that he collected from people that he photographed and offer them up to some archive so that uh, those
Uh,
moments are preserved?
um, I doubt it. He was never thinking about the future. He was very much in the present. And so they got used in different ways by communities. Um, and a number of things appeared in the Bethel First 100 Years book.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, a lot of them, I mean, there's four different Rolodexes. And one of them has a numbering system that I don't understand that is some kind of documentation of those historic photographs. And I don't know, some graduate student is going to have to
His
figure
his
it
work
out.
did go to the archives at UAF.
Yeah, they're at the Polar
All of
Archives
his negatives and
and
lots of
contact
prints and
sheets. And
contact sheets.
the other thing is, he did always, even before he came to Alaska, he always did interviews and took field notes. He'd sit down and at the end of the day and he'd write. He was dyslexic. I mean, they're crazy, but um, you know, books and books of things that he's written are just sitting in boxes.
That's one thing I really respected about him because it was a habit that I did not have of as a reporter going to visiting villages. Of course, I worked primarily for many years in video, and I did not take copious notes saying who I was getting
Mm.
images of, who our photographer was documenting. And I noticed that when Jim was out in the field, that he would take copious notes about who the person was. And in fact, I actually do now recall, now that you mentioned the dance festivals, the very first time I met Jim was at a dance festival in Mountain Village.
Yeah.
And actually, in one of his photos, I'm like somewhere standing in the back with Alexi Isaac, who was
Oh.
videotaping that session for KYUK. And somebody sent me that photograph years later, and I hadn't seen it, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" You know, I don't even remember that photo being taken. Because you're right, is when Jim went to a place, he merged with it. But one of the things that he did impress upon me, besides taking copious notes, is that you have to do an authentic job of photographing something. If you can, you have to recognize that many things repeat themselves. I mean, sometimes there's just that one moment, like the woman that was holding those seal gut tubes. I'll just call them tubes, the
Yeah.
balloons. But I mean, that's like a once in a lifetime kind of moment that you see. But he said that you have to recognize that things will happen again. And so when I go to a village and I miss it, I will go back at the same time and see if I can find it again, or at least I know that the odds of capturing, whether they were hunting for beluga whales or whether they were cutting up seals, uh, he would capture that moment. And I know that dancing was one of those things that he
Yeah.
understood that native dancing had a format and a repetition, and that he could see the women in the same position with their dance fans return again. So he knew how to like capture that moment rather than just willy-nilly trying to take pictures because often, an amateur like me, the event happens and I've shot the picture after
Yeah.
it just because I'm not fast enough to catch it, and I wasn't savvy enough to know that that motion she's gonna be in that spot again, and her arms will be up with the dance fans
Sure.
again. So don't be following her, just be ready in that spot for that photo. And
Mm,
to
mm.
me that was just you know he wrote a book, he put together that book Always Getting Ready because he was talking about native people always getting ready for their subsistence harvest for whatever the season. But could you say that he was a photographer who was always getting ready, that that was the secret to
Ah,
his moments?
yeah, I would say so. I mean, he really knew because we stayed there so long. He was really in sync with the whole annual subsistence cycle. So, in a way, he was kind of always anticipating, oh, egg hunting's going to be happening. It happened last year. It's going to happen again this year, whatever. So in his head, and probably with his cameras, etc.,
Yeah.
he was getting ready, just like everybody else in his own way. Yeah, I had never thought about that, but
Yeah.
it's kind of true.
Charles, I I had the sense back then. I know that Robin just said that he didn't think about the future, but I had the sense when I met him and watched him work that he was preserving the moments for the future, where these moments might not be
Oh,
there.
I think she didn't mean it quite that way.
no, I didn't
I think
think
Jim
that.
very much saw his pictures in history
Yeah.
and was happy when the archives took them and things like that. Or anybody when you know, Jim photographed the march in Selma, and a collector bought his original prints, the battle-worn prints, and I think Jim was very proud of that.
Yeah.
And that that it was the prints that had history to them that went to this person. And
So
so
you're talking about the Martin Luther King March in
yeah, March
Selma.
and
That was his that is on his website. You can see
yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
it's that same documentarian approach to
Right.
photography.
And a sense of history. He he went there from Washington State to photograph as a very young man, and also didn't know what he was getting into, and did a wonderful job.
But also, I guess what I meant was he was on to the next thing.
Hmm.
He was in the moment. And those photographs of the Selma March, I did not know they existed and that he had been on the march for 15 years. They sat in a box in the closet. And somehow it came out. Oh yeah, I was on the Selma March. No, because when he was done in Selma, he was just on to the next thing, and his head was in
Yeah.
what he was doing. So in that sense, he was in the moment because he wasn't fussing about you know getting a show or yeah
Getting
and
to work out there.
or yeah getting his work out there. I did a little of that,
Yeah.
but
Jim's work, I think in black and white, he said more than color will ever say in some ways, It was actually more colorful in black and white. One of the things that I also wanted to ask you about, Robin, is that Jim did have a period at KYUK where he worked in radio, and he did work in television as KYUK was getting into television. And I'll share my own Jim Barker story in which I was horrified that he told me this, but he had grabbed some video equipment that KYUK had just purchased, and it was that old style camera equipment in which the the video tape recorder was on a separate unit, and the camera was a big heavy thing with tubes. And he took that out and to a village, I don't remember which one, maybe you will remember, but there was a plane crash. The plane he was in crashed.
I can tell you that story. It was Tuntatuliak, and it was fall, and so there was grass, and it was frosted over, and Tuntatuliak's runway was on a curve,
Yeah.
and he got he and the videographer got on the plane, and they got partway around the curve, and the wheel caught something, and the plane flipped over upside down. And they crawled out, and they she took the camera, and he did the stand up with a mic, and his hat, he had a beaver hat, and it was on kind of sideways, and he was hyperventilating.
Well, this almost is a little bit funny here. Just about 2 minutes ago, we were just landing here at the Tuntatuliak Airport, and I'm not quite so sure what happened, but the airport is curved, and I'm still a little bit shaking by what has happened here. The plane went off the runway and couldn't follow the curve of the runway. Stan Porter was the pilot. And suddenly we were upside down, and as we were heading over, Stan said, well, here we go. And Nancy Barker, who is behind the camera now, and we were both in it, and we just slowly tipped over, and suddenly everything was stopped, and Stan said, everybody all right? And we were all twisted upside down inside the plane, and everybody was all right. We look at the camera, hoping it's all right as we record this scene.
And the pilot is hiding behind the plane, and then you look over, and here's half the village, running up to the plane,
and here they come. And I have two thoughts in mind: whether I can get back to my class that I'm going to be teaching tonight at 7:30 on photography. Snow goes here running on the ground. I imagine everybody's a little bit surprised we're sitting here filming our own accident, but that's the way it is.
And then the mayor gets on the mic and talks about how they need a new runway.
My name is Thomas Charlie Hazen of Tuntatuliak, and it would be a good time for the legislators or the BLM in Anchorage to lease our construction, which was approved by the legislature in 1970, which is 3,000 feet, and the runway should have been 2,500 feet. And that survey is about half a mile west of the village of Tuntatuliak.
And then another plane landed, and they jumped on it with the tape, flew back to Bethel. And they had originally flown out there because Tuntatuliak was getting TV for the first time. It was going to be the first day they watched the news.
Oh, jeez.
So they go back to Bethel, and they run into the station. They flip the tape in without ever even reviewing it. And so the first thing that Tuntatuliak saw on their TV was their very own plane crash.
And now it seems like maybe the first thing that they're going to see on television might be scenes of the accident down here that have occurred right at the time that we've arrived at Tuntatuliak. So, surprisingly enough, everybody is all right, and it wasn't even very frightening. It all happened rather like slow motion. So, I think this is about it. All we can say for the scene of the accident here. Let's stop this before we say something we don't want to say, Nancy.
And that was like the first time that anything like that had ever happened from a village, like in real time, because people would, if an Anchorage photographer had happened to be out there, they'd have to fly to Anchorage and get that tape. But one of the things I had not heard until recently, someone had come up with an archive of old cassettes at KYUK, and they brought them and they played them at the Bethel Yupik Cultural Center with little listening stations. And of course, one of the big favorites of that was Jim's honey bucket race. And it was literally, sorry, Jim, but it was literally fake news, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was a faux honey bucket brigade. And for the uninitiated, honey buckets are buckets of sewage that people have in their homes where they don't have plumbing, and they have to get them to the sewage lagoon or someplace to dump. And so there was a race at Dull Lake, allegedly a race, and Jim and a young DJ named Peter Twitchell got together and did this mock honey bucket brigade.
And hello, sports fans. Once again, we bring you the annual Bethel Honey Bucket Dumping Contest out here on Dull Lake. The skies are slightly overcast with some wind from the north, and not too bad for the race. What do you think, Pete?
Well, Jim, it looks pretty good out here. We've got quite a good crowd gathered, a few more than last year. Looks like the contestants are getting ready, so before it gets started, why don't you describe how this contest works, Jim?
Tell us the
Sounds like Jim.
backstory on that, Robin.
Oh, they just, he and Peter just dreamed. I mean, it just popped into his head. I don't know.
There is a black line in the snow right in front of us called the dump line, and this is where most of the action is. And right beside this line is a telephone and a full honey bucket. The teams of 2 men stand on the line, and when the telephone rings, one of them reaches down and answers saying, "City Shop." He quickly puts down the phone, and then both dash 43 yards to the honey bucket truck. They start the truck and drive it quickly as they can up to the line. Stop the engine, get out, and one person hands up the bucket to the other, and the dump is made. A good quick dump takes a lot of skill, and these teams practice pretty hard to do it quickly.
The audio was so well crafted, it sounded very real, and people told me years later that people thought it was actually live coverage and that they'd go out to Dull Lake looking for this honey bucket brigade.
Yeah.
And now we're getting quiet again. The crowd calms down, waiting for that phone to ring, waiting and waiting.
City Shop.
And there they go. They're off and running hard. An excellent getaway. Very fine effort. Heavy reaches the truck. Look at them work. Those boys really know what they're doing. They're just great. And the crowd likes them too. And there's upswing, heavy. And he missed.
What a mess!
All over the truck and the ground, and the environmental judge looks up. And yes, Pete, they are disqualified. Disqualified.
And they were doing so well.
Did you see what happened? Could you see it?
Yes, I saw it, Jim. I could see it from here. Heavy made the same error that Barney made 9 years ago. The bucket caught on his sleeve. What a mess. Thankfully, there was not anyone injured.
Yes, we're thankful for that. And that about winds up the day of competition here, don't you think, Pete?
Yes, that's it. So we take you back to the studio announcer at KYUK. Take it away, KYUK.
Well, another thing I had heard about, but I've never actually heard one of these episodes on the radio, was his character Snow Machine Bob. That it was like a vignette that would come on the radio. What was the story behind Snow Machine Bob?
Same kind of thing. This character came into his mind, and he's screaming up the Kuskokwim on his snow machine. He's got a TV mounted on the front of the snow machine so we can watch Wild Kingdom.
Hi, my name's Snow Machine Bob. Now I can't wait for the snow and for the river to freeze up. Man, there is nothing I'd like to do better than to climb on my super special machine. It's got a 950cc engine under the hood, but nobody knows that. I love to climb on that critter and squeeze that throttle and man, I like to go and feel that belt churning up the ice. Woo-wee with that trip, whipping down the river well over 100 miles an hour. Then I reach down and turn on my radio. You see, I got earphones so I can hear the radio with all that noise. Last year I was zooming along, river hit a drift, and man, I took off through the air. It was like the Wright brothers, Then I crunched into the ice, machine exploded, hood flew over there, belt over here, parts all over the place. And the engine was just still whining out, dancing around on the ice like a thing possessed, Well, there I was, miles from anywhere, listening to the radio, just lying there with a broken neck, a broken this, and a broken that. Old KYUK sure sounded good out there on the ice.
I once heard, I was walking down the hall in an office building, and I could hear the radio in one of the offices, and there was Snow Machine Bob on the radio, and I heard one of the women say, "I hate Snow Machine Bob." He was kind of an obnoxious guy, but yeah, Anyway, yeah, he had a real imagination for.
He was very multifaceted in that sense, from his photography to his radio work,
Yeah.
and just I guess a wicked sense of humor that actually you really couldn't see in his photography per
No,
se,
no.
other than just an eye for what was human. And some of his photos were funny. The expressions that people had were
Yeah,
funny, and he captured those. But I don't
Okay.
think you would know from those photos that he
no.
was. He definitely had a huge sense of humor.
Yeah.
The other last thing I would just like to ask you about before we go, are there some things about Jim that you'd like to share that we might not know, both of you?
He's got bodies of work that people don't really know about. Before he came to Alaska, he spent 2 years um, mostly living with a welfare family with 9 kids, and just intimate photographs of this family and the children. And they were dumpster diving. He went out with them.
Amazing photographs.
And they're really wonderful photographs. And of course he went to Antarctica twice and did, again, kind of intimate photographs of this support staff and the scientists at work, and sort of the culture of a place where culture is sort of being created recently.
And also, Jim, one of the things he showed my class and me once was the wedding that he had showed.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so some friends, I don't know who the people were, still
Friends.
before you came up, but he was asked to shoot a wedding, so he photographed it. And when you asked Jim to shoot your wedding, he showed up at 6 a.m. and gets you naked getting out of bed with your partner. That's the first photograph in the album, and then goes through the day. And it was a wonderful set of pictures.
Yeah.
But you kind of go, wow, so that's where the wedding starts, right? And beautiful work.
Yeah, as I've said before, Jim and I got together, and our first year was like a giant, huge fire and then a flood, and I don't know what. It was a very romantic year.
Where did you get
But
together at?
in Bethel.
Oh, you
Yeah.
you met in Bethel.
Yeah.
You didn't come to Bethel as a married couple.
No, no, no.
He had his eye on her, I heard.
Yeah, he has a picture of me arriving, coming through the door for the first time. But anyway, he we'd been together for 3 months or so, and he got out the portfolio of this family and started showing me all these sensitive pictures of these children and the parents and so on. And I thought, he's a keeper.
Yeah.
This man is a keeper.
Yeah.
So he courted you with his photographs.
Yeah.
Hey, they're a mirror to the soul, right?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
they say anyway.
Well, Robin, you get the last word. He was your soulmate. You were the wind behind his wings many times out in the field. What are your parting thoughts?
I don't know how many people have the gift of 50 years together with someone you love, I'm just so thankful. I'm so thankful for that. And I'm proud of his legacy. And I'm really enjoying that people have all these stories to tell. He left a lot of stories behind. So, yeah, Eric and I are very sad, but he just lived an amazing life.